I'm here to talk about money, and not just about money generally, but about making money. And that often means looking at museums as if it were a business. And that makes me actually have the role of something like a pantomime villain this afternoon, because museums and making money and commercial things not often go happily together. But before I get into that, I just want to say a few words about the Science Museum Group. We are 5 museums across the UK. Together, we have 5.5 million visitors a year, and the Science Museum in London gets 3.3 million visitors a year. The museums, as you can see on the chart, are the Science Museum in London. We have museums in Manchester, Bradford, York, and then in Shildon in the northeast of England. The Science Museum is a traditional collections-based museum. It tells the story of human ingenuity. It seeks to explain how science, technology, engineering, and maths shaped the world that we live in. And we seek to inspire our future. Specifically, we seek to inspire the future through the next generation of scientists and engineers. So that is our purpose, that's our social mission. We're government funded, as are most national museums in the UK, and that means we're free to enter. That's the contract we have with the government. They give us a lot of money, and we make sure that the museum remains free to visitors. Museums, however, are expensive. The bigger the museum, the more expensive it is. Which means, as a not-for-profit organisation with a social mission, matching this with commercial activity is particularly difficult. So, government funding sounds great. We get loads and loads of money, millions and millions of pounds. But this chart shows that profile of that funding over the last number of years. You can see the line on the top is the line of where our funding would have been had it carried on at the level it was set to be with inflation from 2010. The line in the middle is when the funding stopped, and that would have been flat settlement had we got that. And the line below is what's actually happened to our funding. That is, as you can see, 37% reduction in our funding in a 5 or 6 year period. That is dramatic. If we were a business, which we're not in the strict sense, that would be a very, very difficult situation for any organisation to face. So, in order to help us survive and continue to deliver our social mission, we've had to increase our commercial activity. And that means increasing it in a way that some of our audiences, some of our stakeholders, including some of our staff, feel less comfortable with. Today, the Science Museum Group produces around 30% of its income from its self-generated commercial activity. So we live in a mixed economy where we get both government money and we generate money ourselves. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other areas of fundraising activity today. Mostly, I'll touch on one or two, but it's all about the commercial activity that we do, pure commercial activity that we do as an organisation. Being government funded, this means that everybody has an opinion. And that's difficult when you're being very commercial, because people want to tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing, what money you should and shouldn't raise, how you should go about your commercial activity. And being publicly funded, all of those voices have a part to play, and we need to listen to them. But at the same time, we need to survive. So, one of the things that we have to do is to continually remind all of our stakeholders, partners, visitors, commercial people we work with, government, etc., that we are not-for-profit, and that any money that we do make goes towards supporting the mission of the museum. So, what I'm going to do is talk about traditional and what I've called non-traditional areas of income generation. The Science Museum is 60,000 square metres of available public space. Currently, we give over 9% of that, just under 6,000 square metres, to commercial activity. With some plans we've got, that'll rise to around 13%. That's more than many organisations would feel comfortable with, but in the size of 60,000 square metres, it feels appropriate. Looking at catering first, we have at the Science Museum 4 cafes. We happen to outsource them to a catering provider who give us a very, very lucrative income stream. But the catering must be relevant and affordable. And what I mean by relevant is it needs to address the audiences that we're trying to seek. So some of our trustees would like us to have a silver service, high-end restaurant. But that's not our audience. Our audience is families and people from across a whole diverse range of society within the UK. That means that we have to have a catering offer that is suitable for them. It saddens me greatly, but I have to confess, the most common question that is asked of our visitor services staff as visitors leave the museum is, where is the nearest McDonald's? It saddens me because not only would have preferred they'd have eaten in our cafes, it saddens me that so many people would prefer to eat in McDonald's as opposed to anywhere else. But we can't ignore the fact that that is the profile of our audience. That's the kind of catering offer that they want. Now, we're not providing McDonald's, we wouldn't do that, but we do need to recognise the diversity of our audience and provide a catering offer that is suitable for them. Which means basically, in our case, not being too upmarket. Turning to retail, we have at the Science Museum 3 shops. We typically sell tourist merchandise, we sell science, entertainment and engagement merchandise, and we try and make the shop, wherever we can, as relevant as we can. And that's working with suppliers and partners that will help us do that. Importantly, we have tried over many years to develop an online shopping experience. But for us, it's not the same for all museums, but for us that doesn't work, in as much as it doesn't make money, although it's a good showcase. But the retail outputs are really important, but we again need to manage it and match it to our audience and make sure that we stock the kind of things that they want to buy rather than the things we aspire that they would like to buy. Corporate hire, as in renting out the museum space after hours for organisations to use for events like this, seminars, conferences, etc., is a really important part of our business. It's a really important income generator. However, it's not without its ethical pitfalls. There is a problem that we call benefit by association, where an organisation that we might, from an ethical point of view, and I'll cite the example of homeopathy, not something a science museum would ever support, but the Homeopathic Society of the UK would like to use the Science Museum as a venue for their events. That's something where we have to draw the line and say we can't do that. But generally speaking, corporate hire is a very good source of income for us, and we're in fact expanding our corporate hire spaces to create more opportunities. And corporate hire can lead to very good relationships with potential sponsors and other funders. The Science Museum Group, across the whole group, has 4 cinemas, including 2 IMAXs. We have over 7 interactive flight simulators, and on the whole, these are very, very lucrative businesses. However, with our shops and other commercial activities that we've got around the place, we're having to understand much more about the visitor journey, understand what it means for a visitor to arrive, and how many times we're going to be asking them for money. And that's a piece of work we're doing at the moment, because it's really critical to get that right, to maximise spend per head, to make sure we optimise the amount of money that people get without basically annoying them. We also have, moving now to non-traditional areas, we have product licensing, where we create a range of products that we sell not just in our own shops, but through other retailers. And we have touring exhibitions. Touring exhibitions can be very successful, but they do require a lot of hard work, and you need to manage them carefully and make sure that you build on good relationships with partner museums around the world. I just want to quickly say something about that. That is, as you can guess, a solar farm. It is a 60 megawatt solar farm covering 37 hectares. Why is it in this presentation? Because we own a 220 hectare airfield where we have our large object store outside of London. We had some spare land. We did a deal with an energy provider, and we created one of the largest solar farms in the UK. Not only is this on brand, because it's about new technologies, it's about science and renewables, but it also generates a very significant revenue stream for us because the electricity generated gets put straight back into the grid, the national grid, and we charge for that. We generate around about £250,000 a year. That's about £1 million reals from this solar farm. That's an example of us being opportunistic. We don't go out and plan these things long-term in advance. The opportunity came up, and we decided to take it. This is much more about planning. I said we're going to increase the amount of commercial space we have at the museum. This is one example. This is going to be a new supporters and patron centre, and we're also building, as I suggested, a new corporate hire space to increase our opportunity to rent out dedicated space for companies, for seminars and meetings such as this one. They take investment. They take a bold attitude, which is something that I sometimes struggle with some of my colleagues to get them to support, because it requires investment and it means taking risks. But the situation we're in with our funding model means that we have to take some risks. We have to take some risks in order to generate the rewards. Wonderlab. Wonderlab is a new interactive gallery. We've always had an interactive gallery at the Science Museum. This is where children come and they effectively play with exhibits that are very deeply rooted in scientific principles. We've recently relaunched our interactive gallery and called it Wonderlab, but you'll see underneath it, it says the Statoil Gallery. Most people haven't heard of Statoil. They're the Norwegian state oil company. And not surprisingly, the Science Museum attracted some criticism in the press for our relationship with Statoil. However, I will say that our visitors have, apart from a very small handful, not complained. They have not had a problem with this at all. And the money that we got from Statoil enabled us to redevelop this gallery. The total cost of the gallery was over £6 million, and the money from Statoil enabled us to do that, which we wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. I don't want to get into the ethics of oil company sponsorship per se, but this particular project did mean that we had to do a lot of persuasion and encouragement for our staff that this was the right thing to do. We go back to the social mission of the Science Museum, and we've heard earlier how the mission of each individual museum is really important to engage all of our staff in that. Some of our staff don't feel comfortable with this level of commercialisation, and that took some persuading, not only of the staff but of the Board of Trustees, that this was the right thing to do. The Science Museum is, as we said, free to enter, but we need to encourage as much donations as possible. So what we've done recently, over the last number of years, is actively ask our visitors to give us a donation at the front desk. As they come in, rather than some museums that are free to enter have a donations box as you leave, we've taken this decision to actually ask for that donation as people arrive. Again, it's been a big cultural shift for our organisation, but it has been hugely successful. We generate several millions of pounds a year through this process, and the number of complaints, again, is extremely low. But, like Statoil, this required a significant cultural shift for our staff and some of our key stakeholders. So, in becoming more commercial, one of our hardest challenges is to engage our staff and all of the whole team at the museum in recognising the need for greater commerciality. And that has to be maintained in line with our social mission. But without that commercial income and without that greater focus on income, we would struggle to thrive as a museum. So in summary, the changes in our funding model from government have forced us to be much more dramatic and much more overt in our commercial income generation. And that is a challenge for not only us, but all nationally funded museums in the UK, and I suspect many museums around the world. Maintaining not-for-profit status and maintaining a social mission is hard to balance with overt commercial activity, but we feel it needs to be done. And interestingly, the biggest barrier that we've faced is persuading ourselves that this is the right thing to do. As a museum professional, we need to understand different ways of working and understand how we're going to operate in a mixed economy model. To quote Darwin, we must adapt or die. Thank you.